Before we start?
Okay, now I got to get used to reading my own poetry. I call this breath of joy. My yoga teacher has this asana where you lift up your arms and then you hug yourself. He invented breath of joy, so I read this to him too. Okay. I was going through a doubtful time, and thank God my poetry, helped. Okay, breath of joy. My blessings of moments fear cannot have, as I claim today total gratitude. Begone bogus powers with your threats of hell. Real strength is here in light of now. Past illusions, forgiveness conquered. Future threats will not be fed. Faith and love beyond all doubt. Vivid colors of memory welcome me back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I made a few decisions here.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, we have less than an hour to do the 5 stages. Let's see, we're up to slide 16, and there are 50 slides. Gee, I'm sorry, guys. You're going to take a couple hours more. No, I think what we'll do is I'll be sure that I do each of the 5 characteristics, and we'll skip a few slides along the way because I want to move on to the next topic next time. So why I brought up Evelyn before is that in her work, Evelyn found 5 stages in spiritual development, which she felt that all mystics went through. And she said she did not invent these stages, she found them. She kept noticing that there was there in St. Teresa of Avila, or it was in Roysbrook, or where she loved a lot, or in any different mystic, there were these stages. And what's interesting about it is, as I was doing that, and then as I was reading the 6 stages in the development of trust from A Course in Miracles, they're identical. They're almost perfectly identical. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? We've got these 5 stages and these 6 stages. Now, the only thing is that in 2 and 3, stage 2 and 3 of the Course is 2 of hers. And so in other words, she's got 2 of them in 1. Otherwise, they would be really so identical, it's just amazing. So it kind of shows you that they're there. Here's another mystic that also found them in her own process. Purgation and sorting out, the first 2 described in both the Course and in Evelyn's book are strikingly similar. And then Evelyn's second stage, which she calls purgation, is similar to the second and third stage of the Course, sorting out and relinquishing. And the last 2 stages described by Evelyn in the Course are nearly identical. The next to the last stage is identified by Evelyn as the final dark night of the soul. Sorry about that. Who wants to hear about the dark night of the soul? But the good news is that following the dark night of the soul, the last stage is enlightenment. So the last stage is we're home. It's done. We're really, really through with that. So as I said earlier, there's a reason why 1 is 1 and 2 and 10 is 10. And let's go on. So the first characteristic teacher God develops is trust. So we really trust that there is a God, right? And the God has an answer for us, and that God loves us, and that God has set out a pathway by which we may all get home. And our happiness is just dependent upon our ability to make the decision to wake and place our foot on the path and begin the journey home. It's that simple. But you got to be, actually, and you could say in some ways, everybody is on the planet is on the path, but there's a difference between doing it consciously, choosing to do it, and kind of have it happen to you. Because when it kind of happens, then we kind of wonder what the hell is going on and why do I have to go through this experience? Without realizing that this experience is a part of my spiritual growth and development. Very often that will happen to people later on, maybe usually after you get through the stage, not while you're in the stage, but when you complete it, you'll understand. You look back and say, now I see why that divorce had to happen, or why that bankruptcy had to happen, or why that experience had to come my way, because this was my teacher. It's life which is teaching me. Life is the experience. Life is the teacher, right? And by the way, the definition of God in the Course is that God is life. So we're going through this process called life. So trusting, we find our way home. Lesson 47 from the workbook says, God is the strength in which I trust. Okay? So I'm going to move faster through these. All right, so we all know that it says in God we trust on all. It's interesting, it's on all of our money. And it's been that way since 1956, 57. It first appeared in 1964 on the 2-cent piece. Remember the 2-cent piece? No. Trusting in our own strength, we have every reason to be apprehensive and unhappy. So one of the things that we could trust in is we trust the ego. But trusting in the ego to make a lot of money or to become famous or to get whatever you want in the world is building your house on sand. And it's not gonna last. It's not gonna be very good. So thankfully we need not trust in our own strength. God's voice speaks to us all through the day. And trust, by the way, I want to say this, it does not mean trusting, doesn't mean that we trust our brother's ego, which can be sometimes I think people misinterpret that I trust my brothers. Well, that is a lie because I trust my brothers who are one with me, but with your eyes open, because obviously we can get into trouble too. And somebody told me about a problem they had last night of trusting that somebody was going to fix their house, and guess what? They got the money in advance and disappeared. How those things happen, right? Okay, so this is just trusting. Consider the lilies of the field, Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew. They toil not, neither do they spin, yet even Solomon, all of his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. So everything is taken care of. The lilies of the field are taken care of. We're taken care of. So the steps and stages. So there are obvious overlaps in these stages. I mean, it would be very difficult, for example, to say, oh, I'm in stage 3 or I'm in stage 4. There'd be a lot of gray areas in there where the kind of overlaps that are going on. And not only that, but it's not as though you go through this one time and then you're done with it. I think each of us will probably find ourselves going through these steps and stages several times in the course of our lives. You might go through these steps and stages, for example, say with the death of a spouse. Okay, and so you find yourself going through the despair and the anguish and the parts of the experience is just, it has all these characteristics to it. So 1 through 5 we may repeat many different times, but each time that we do it, it should also be taking us a little bit deeper. The 6th stage is, once you get to the 6th stage, that's it. There is nothing, the 6th stage is, you're home, you're in heaven, you've reached the end of the journey. So the ego by nature is not trusting. Trusting in God is learned through seeing through the eyes of Spirit. To this we must ask Spirit for help and trust His guidance. You got to really, as a Course in Miracles student, you want to frequently ask for help of the Holy Spirit, knowing that that help is there. And you say, I need help with this. And by the way, what some people do is they tell the Holy Spirit what they want the result to be, and then say, and this is what the result is, right? But no. You trust that regardless of how it comes out, let's say you're praying for somebody to live, well, they die. Well, that was the right thing. That was what was supposed to happen, right? It's not your wishes necessarily that makes it come true, okay? When the power of the Holy Spirit has been experienced by you in any situation, and you see that the result is what was the right result, it may mean being fired from a job. Help me. Well, no, that was what, I think I told you the story once. A guy told me that he was fired from a job. And he's walking out the front door of the office building. They escorted him to the front door, one of those type situations, right? And he goes, Holy Spirit, help. And he hears, you just got help. I just did help you, So, all right, the 5 stages, 6 stages. Number 1 is a period of undoing, leading to awakening and increased awareness. That's one of the characteristics you got to look at too, is there's always an increased awareness that eventually comes as a result of this. So we're often dealing with external changes in the world in the first step. A relationship may end, a business fails, an accident occurs, a move is necessary. The Course refers to this as a period of undoing. What is the atonement process? It's a process of undoing, right? It's a process of letting go. So Underhill, the undoing according to Underhill leads to an awakening to the awareness of the divine. It's just the experience itself is the thing which is putting our foot on the path. It's showing us that there is a spiritual answer to the problem that we're facing. There's often some kind of crash and burn experience. That means by crash I mean totally crashing and burning. There is a death, there is a loss. Something falls apart. As a matter of fact, if you look at my book on, either one of the 2 books on mysticism, I tell about a research study that was done at Oxford a number of years ago, back in the 80s, but it's still an ongoing. You can go online and look for the Religious Experience Research Institute continues the study of mystical experiences, and they have received thousands of descriptions of mystical experiences that people, you can go on and do it yourself. Go online to the Religious Experience Research Institute, type in your experience, it'll be added to the database. They've analyzed the database. The number 1 cause for mystical experiences are crash and burn experiences. All right? You get wiped out. It's interesting what number 2 is. Number 2 is meditation. And it's interesting because on both cases, you're back to 0. Right? I mean, you're down to not projection. There's no attack, there's no, there's an emptying out of everything before you can begin to move on. This stage need not be painful, but it often is experienced that way. I'm just going to go on because in the interest of time. So after the burning and the crashing, after the disillusionment, or better, as a result of meditation, we experience a new awareness, often follow a deeper seeking. That's the nice part of it. Something questions the nature of reality, and the collusion of illusion, which I've referred to here, which we are all a part of. There is a question of reality as defined by the church, the school, culture, news. People will often quit the church at this point, because they realize that that's not the place where they're going to be getting their answers. A change in direction now occurs. They start doing, they find A Course in Miracles or something else. It doesn't have to be the Course. that begins to guide their process. And they begin to experience a reversal in thinking. So one of the ways this sometimes happens is with a midlife crisis. It's interesting that we don't see very many people under the age of 40 studying A Course in Miracles. And I think one of the reasons for that is because under the age of 40, you're busy finding a mate and establishing a career and having children and buying a house and paying bills, and all the external stuff of the world is sort of taking all of our attention. And once the kids are there, or the whatever has happened, you begin to you question what the purposes of life is. You know, in the Kabbalah, you don't study the Kabbalah till you're 40. I mean, that's tradition. You know, you could study it before you're 40, but traditionally you don't study it till you're 40, because you got to kind of get all the basic stuff of life done first, and then you can begin to. The householding phase is completed, and now you can move on beyond the householding phase. Story of church and custodian. I'll just tell you this. This is an interesting story. I used to go to retreats at New Melbury Abbey, which is a monastery in Iowa, which is near where I went to college. And I was giving a talk once at Unity of Indianapolis. And the custodian who was there listening to the talk I was doing came up to me afterwards. And I somehow or another mentioned New Melbury Abbey. And he said, I used to be a monk at New Melbury Abbey. And he said the most interesting thing, he said, it was very nice, and it was certainly very devotional. We spent hours every day singing and doing the chants. And they were Trappists, so they lived in quiet. He says, but there was an underlying current that was very unpleasant. And the underlying current that was very unpleasant was that the abbot kind of ran it as a dictator, and he had his favorites, and then there were those that he didn't like, and so the ones he didn't like got the dirtiest jobs and put down, etc., and the favorites got kind of pushed up. And he says it was just got to the point where there was so much gossip and stuff, and this is in a monastery, right? And stuff going on. He says it was like the outside world. He says, I came in here to get away from that, and I found that here it was inside the monastery. So he said, so this is his crash and burn experience. So he said, one day I put my work clothes on, that I would go out to work in the fields with, and I got my razor and what little money I had, and I walked to the front door and opened it and stood and looked out and started walking. And I never looked back. He just walked away from, and I was working at a janitor's in church in Indianapolis, and finding A Course in Miracles. Sort of interesting story. Okay, stage 2 is purification, purgation, or sorting out. So Underhill calls this second stage purification. The Spanish mystic Teresa of Avila called it purgation. The Course calls it a period of sorting out. According to Underhill, no one can skip this stage. This is a time of cleaning and clearing and letting go of fears, unessential anxieties, false concepts, all that kind of stuff that we might be letting go of. Changes may occur in relationships with parents, children, careers, health issues, money issues, etc. Trust is important now as our vision is progressively being perfected. But I think we all, it's interesting in the book that you're reading, the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I've mentioned this before, but one of his basic principles to start with is make your own bed, clean up your own room before you start trying to fix the world. In other words, clean up your own life, get that working well, and then it'll be easier to help out in the greater perspective thing. Partly because people see that you've done it. And if you can get your act together, then it's going to help other people to understand, oh, they did it, I can do it as well, right? It's hard to follow someone who seems to be kind of lost themselves, right? Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within you. So that's what we're doing. This is the cleaning of the house. The cleaning of the house, we're looking for the barrier. We're looking for the dark spots. Look at the guilt. Don't bury the guilt. Look at it and think about, why is this here? Why do I have these fearful thoughts? Face it straight on. That's the way to handle it. And then deal with it, whatever that means. Whatever it means dealing. Deal with what's going on in the relationship. Deal with what's going on with the finances, whatever they are. Just don't keep burying it under the rug. Look at it, right? So it is necessary to seek for what is false. It says it's not necessary to seek for what is true, but it is necessary to seek for what is false. Very important. Don't go looking for the truth until you first... The truth will come to you automatically. It'll just come in and fill in the empty space that appears once we've cleaned out the false stuff in the first place, right? So look at every self-seeking motive, every addiction, compulsion, obsession, embellishment, exaggeration, complaining, for all the stuff that you just... I'm doing a Zoom class right now, and one of the students I'll talk about, she was noticing, like, she's catching herself complaining. And I thought, well, that's really good. I mean, that's if you catch the complaining, if you just do it without noticing that you're doing it, then you're caught, you're trapped in it. But once you catch it, oh my God, I complain a lot. Why are you doing that? This is something I could let go of, right? This bitching and griping and stuff. It's that makes me unhappy, So, after a few weeks of being sober, folks who join Alcoholics Anonymous often report a kind of clarity or an awareness that they didn't even know existed. It's after a while. It's after you have to kind of get really, really clear for a while, and the fog begins to lift and disappear, and the new experience comes into the mind, clarity and awareness. I'll just read the quotes from the Course here. You are asked to let yourself be free of all the dreams of what you never were, and seek no more to substitute the strength of idle wishes for the will of God. Idle wishes would be all kinds of things about the world and the things that we want from the world to be giving us. Let it go. Forget about it. It's not necessary. The only thing that's really necessary is doing God's will. And if I'm doing that, then that's what matters. There may be a kind of catharsis that happens, a kind of regurgitation, a purification that comes up at this point. I think in AA you're asked to talk, to give it up to God, yourself, and to one other person, right? And that helps to clarify things, right? Consistent practice now becomes necessary to maintain focus. This is why it's important to go through the lessons of the workbook. It takes a lot of work to retrain the mind. We literally have to begin thinking in a wholly new way, right? Increasing willingness one day at a time is required. If you allow yourself to have your mind only, in your mind, only what God put there, you are acknowledging your mind as God created it. This is why it really is important. If you've not done the lessons in the Course, it's important to do the lessons. This is the mind, this is where the mind training occurs. And the reversal in thinking occurs. It is a wholly different way of thinking. It's not thinking about the world at all. What are you laughing at, Terrence? So a marriage therapist tells me she sometimes, yeah, right, wishes she could tell her clients, stop it, be responsible, get off of it, and stop whining. Of course she doesn't do that. Teachers of God never frighten their students, right? Instead they choose a peaceful path. Seek the path of heaven with firm determination, and you will see the original thing. This is from a Chinese Taoist. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. All things, encounters, and events are helpful. It is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality should be accorded them in this world. I have a friend who's going through a crash and burn right now, I mean, really another one, and I'm sure he does not have any idea why this crash and burn experience that he's going through is happening, but give it a couple of years. So self-discipline deepens as we realize what is valuable and what's not valuable. There's a whole section in the course on I will not value what is valueless. It's one of the workbook lessons. Right? Every self-seeking motive that is not grounded in love, the point is not about giving up things. It's about realizing the value we place on our desires for idols from the outside instead of peace with them. I mean, who doesn't want peace with? That's number one. That's got to be number one. It doesn't make any difference what the external circumstances are that are around you. If you've got peace of mind, you got it. Okay? And go on. Here's our friend Aldous Huxley again. Where we expected to find a loss, we find a love. Once the bankruptcy is over, the divorce is done, the house is sold, the job is lost, some perspective and respite can come along. Aldous Huxley, standing watching his home burn down during the Bell fires of 1961, was asked somebody how it feels to see everything that he owned being completely destroyed, and he said, "It's a marvelously clean feeling." Huxley could say that. He died 2 years later. You know that Aldous Huxley, John F. Kennedy, and C.S. Lewis all died the same day? Yeah. Yeah, November 23rd, 1963, right? Pardon? November 22nd, rather. Uh-huh. I think it's interesting that they all died at the same. Huxley's and C.S. Lewis made the back of the paper, of course, but I just wonder if they were needed as help guides. I don't know. It's a thought, just a thought. I had a friend who, that's to take me aside. We want to get through this. Who did have an experience of, going along with the death and thinking he was supposed to go along with it. Stage 4 is a period of settling down, illumination, resting in reasonable peace. Underhill calls this fourth stage illumination. The fourth stage, seen by some as a final stage, as it's a quiet time. So you think you kind of got it worked out. It's a period of respite and reasonable peace. Freed of what held us back, we can now make better choices. We begin to employ many of the characteristics of a teacher of God. We're more honest, patient, generous, open-minded, less judgmental. We become increasingly attentive to inner guidance. We give up looking for peace on the outside, preferring to look within. We can relax a while, forgive all things that can hurt us, and overlook what's not there. So this is some people think this is the end. They've done it. And I thought this is the idea of the cosmic dancer. The Course speaks of what it calls a bridge to the real world as a symbol for the shift from perception to knowledge. There's a shifting that occurs from perception. It's not about the world at all anymore. It's just about inner awareness. And in Islam, there's a saying of Jesus, Ishraq, it says, the world is a bridge, cross the bridge, but do not build on it. Right? It's a period of transition that we're going through. And Joe Campbell called this stage the mastery of two worlds. So we stand outside heaven's door, but not yet at the top of the ladder. As the spiral comes around again, we move ever closer to the center. We go from here not alone, but more aware of the mighty companions and the loving thoughts we hold for everyone. Mighty companions, by the way, might include people, but it also includes the characteristics of a teacher of God that we're incorporating. Those are our companions. Patience is our companion. Faithfulness is our companion. Anybody ever read John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress? if you ever read Pilgrim's Progress, he has companions, like Faithful is one of his companions and others. They all have names like that. Those are the kind of companions this Course is talking about. Now, wouldn't you know it, stage 5. We're getting very close to the end now, but the last stage, not the last stage, this is the next to the last stage, is described as the dark night of the soul, a period of unsettling. I like this from the Upanishads. The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus the wise say, the path to salvation is hard. By the way, anybody ever read The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham, which is, right? At this point, the fear of death of the ego becomes very real. This is the big let go. The Spanish mystic St. John of the Cross made popular this phrase, dark night of the soul, to describe this stage. He described the hardship the soul meets in its final journey and literal detachment from all things, including the body. Evelyn Underhill called this stage the dark night. In the dark night, we face the end of ourselves as distinct individuals, unbeknownst to the ego. So there really is a complete letting go of everything of this world. My friend Rod Schoberg has just written a book. Rod spent the last 5 or so years of his life running a hospice center, and he would have to be the one who did the pronouncements that they were gone, but it also meant that he did a lot of work with people who were leaving, and he describes this. I had to read the book, it's not out yet, but I wanted to write it so I can produce a comment for the back of the book. And he describes how so many people, when they get to that last days, it can be such a variation going on all the way from being very peaceful to tremendous resistance. But then followed by letting go, eventually letting go. In this one case I remember reading about, he said that he was a really rough man, very, very difficult man, who I think was also an alcoholic and had mistreated his family. And 2 or 3 days before he died, he confesses everything and begs his wife for forgiveness for the way he treated her, and etc. And it's just a beautiful story about how she said she was going to bury the man she fell in love with instead of the man that he became, right? He said he became who he was in the very beginning again. Okay? So people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. This is from Jung. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is what we talked about a couple weeks ago too, when we were looking at the shadow work, right? So the last of the characteristics the teacher of God developed is total open-mindedness, in which all judgment is set aside. We cannot go back, and going forward seems fearful. It means moving fully into the heart of God. Yet we go forward knowing that the world I seek holds nothing that I want. There's nothing in this world. There really is. In the end, dust. Right? The closer you come to the foundation of the ego's thought system, the darker and more obscure becomes the way. Yet even the little dark in your mind is enough to lighten it. The little spark, that's an interesting mistake. The little spark in your mind isn't enough to lighten it. Bring the light fearlessly with you and bravely hold it up to the foundation of the thought system, right? To be able to look at it all, to do the let go. Some folks were surprised to hear that Mother Teresa, in correspondence with her spiritual director, described in deeply moving words her struggles with faith and her doubts and her sense of abandonment from God. In a public release letter to her spiritual counselor, Reverend Michael Vanderpeet, boy, I don't know how this slide got like this. She said, see if I got this, I'm not sure. The silence and the emptiness are so great that I look and do not listen. And do not see. I listen and do not hear. The tongue moves in prayers but does not speak. I pray for you. I want you to pray for me. Let him have a free hand. So it's not surprising. I don't think it was surprising at all that she went through this at the end, right? Because she's just being honest about what was going on with her. And this is from Joseph Campbell. I had the fortune. I studied with Joseph Campbell for a little bit here in New York at the C.G. Young Center. One thing that comes out of myths is that at the bottom of the abyss comes the voice of salvation. The blackest moment is the moment when the real message of transformation is going to come. At the darkest moment comes the light. Close to end. Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then total submission, into your hands I commend my spirit. And then it's finished. No longer identify with the self we created. We let go of the illusory dream and say, let me not forget myself is nothing, but myself is all. Coming again and rising even higher. Stages 1 through 5 may be repeated many times in different ways, different ages. Progress always ever upward and inward, like a spiral. Thus more closely focused on home. With each round comes a more refined and purification along with greater awareness. And then I really enjoy reading Nisargadatta, who says, to know yourself, you must go beyond yourself. And finally, stage 6. Evelyn Underhill calls this union with God, perfect happiness or heaven. The Course tells us is completion. And you all know the story of Bill Thetford. I've told you that many times before, that on the day before he died, he starts saying, I feel so whole, I feel so complete, I feel so free. All my relationships feel so completely healed and whole. And the next day he died. What a thing to say the day before you died, right? So the world ends with a sensation of separation. Complete forgiveness is the final goal of the curriculum. God begins where learning ends. Home in God, the mind no longer wanders. There's no more unnecessary detours, no more decision making. Illusions are forever set aside. Following only God's plan, we are directed straight to heaven. Peace of mind and awareness of heaven are complete. Heaven is your natural state. You never left home. True steps forward in light. It's really the way the Course is. It's really like waking up in the morning. I mean, it's really like waking up and realizing that you've been dreaming a dream. And it's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, or Alice in Wonderland, or anything. You never left your home. You never left your bed. you were home all along, and you just had this incredible dream, which for some people is a nightmare, right? Enlightenment is but a recognition, not a change at all. That's an important line, I think, from the Course. It's a recognition. It's seeing. It's not a change at all. It consists in the dissipation of ignorance concerning ourselves and the remembrance of oneness and eternity. I love this from Richard Bach, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. To fly as fast as thought to anywhere that is, he said, you must begin by knowing that you have already arrived. That's as fast as you can fly. You're already there. And the song of our rejoicing is the call to all the world that freedom is returned, that time is almost over, and God's Son has but an instant more to wait until his Father is remembered. Dreams are gone, eternity has shined away the world, and only heaven now exists. I think that's the end of our slides. It is. Any questions or observations? Yasuko began with sharing the lesson for today with you, and I thought we'd end with a lesson of today as well. Okay, this is a little reinforcement, And then we'll do the Lord's Prayer together, which is the next slide. Okay? So if you want to get relaxed and close your eyes, take a deep breath, be very present. And what I'm going to do, what I asked you to do last time, the phrase is, God goes with me wherever I go. And I will say with me, God goes with me, and then say it with me, okay? God goes with me wherever I go. Deep within you is everything that is perfect, ready to radiate throughout you and out into the world. It will cure all sorrow and pain and fear and loss, because it will heal the mind that thought these things were real and suffered out of its allegiance to them. Say with me, God goes with me wherever I go. You can never be deprived of your perfect holiness, because the Source goes with you wherever you go. You can never suffer, because the Source of all joy goes with you wherever you go. You can never be alone, because the Source of all life goes with you wherever you go. Nothing can destroy your peace of mind, because, say with me, God goes with me wherever I go. You do not believe all this, because the truth is hidden deep within, under a heavy cloud of thoughts dense and obscuring. Let us try today to get past this dark and heavy cloud to the light beyond. If you become fearful at any time in any way, for any reason, simply say with me, God goes with me wherever I go. Turn inward past all the idle thoughts of the world. Try to enter deeply into your own mind, keeping it clear of any thoughts that might divert your attention. Sink down and inward, away from the world, all the foolish thoughts of the world. We are trying to reach past all these things. We are trying to leave appearances and approach reality. Say with me, God goes with me wherever I go. It's quite possible to reach God. In fact, it's very easy, because it is the most natural thing in the world. You might even say it's the only natural thing in the world. The way will open if you believe that it's possible. You can afford to laugh at your fearful thoughts, knowing that, say with me one last time, God goes with me wherever I go. And then let's read the what's called the Lord's Prayer from the Course together. We pause at every comma and take a stop at every period. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can be in us needs forgiveness when yours is perfect. The sleep of forgetfulness is only the willingness. Remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us review all that you have given, and accept but this into the mind which you created and which you love. Amen. So thank you. Next time we will do 4 or 5 of the characteristics of a teacher of God in March, and then we'll do 4 or 5 in April, and then in May we're going to do the class on quantum physics and the course. And those of you want to, thank you.